So, I want to start off the show tonight by staging a little bit of an intervention with you, Mark.
I'm ready.
And
An intervention?
just know that I'm doing this because I care about you.
Wait a minute.
I'll take your word for it.
I have some stuff I want to talk to you about, honestly,
Okay.
as a friend, because, we've worked together for many years. I've known you for a long time. You and I both actually moved to New Hampshire about 8 years ago around the same time.
Almost the same time, yeah.
Even though we didn't know each other personally then. I had been listening to Free Talk Live, so I kind of knew you, but not knew you personally.
Right.
So, I mean, we've had a connection for a while, so I care about you, right? And I feel sad when I see people I consider friends or care about doing stuff that might be frustrating or feel like a waste of time, and causing them headaches and stress. And if you're just listening tonight for the first time, you may not understand the background of this, so I'm going to lay it out a little bit here. As I mentioned, Mark and I have both, separately moved to New Hampshire because we're interested in the Free State Project. And what is the Free State Project? Well, it's a group of people who are interested in getting more freedom in their lives. And whatever that means to them, they're going to move to New Hampshire and get active for freedom in whatever way they kind of choose and think is best. So there's a lot of people who have moved to New Hampshire to get more freedom, some of them before the Free State Project ever even existed, just because New Hampshire has no sales tax, no income tax. It's generally kind of considered a freer place to live, I think, than maybe some of the surrounding places like Massachusetts or something like that.
I think it's undeniable. The Mercatus Center has rated New Hampshire the freest state in the Union 3 out of the 5 times they've rated them. 5 out of the 5 times they've been in the top 5. And as I understand it, they're going to be number 1 on the next one, but we'll see.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of palpable, especially if you've lived
Live free or die.
Yeah. You come into New Hampshire, and I mean, ironically, it's emblazoned on the license plates, which you're forced to get if you want to drive a car. But nonetheless, it does say live free or die. So at least they're paying kind of lip service to freedom. But yeah, it does sort of have more of a independent kind of take responsibility for your own stuff. And, you live by your own merits type of feeling to it when you go into New Hampshire. And so we moved here because we're interested in freedom. Now, when I first moved to New Hampshire, I thought a good way to get freedom was perhaps to get involved in the political system and try to influence the state politics. And a lot of people also had the same idea. It's not, they kind of go out of their way in the wording of the agreement that you sign when you state your interest in the Free State Project. They kind of go out of their way to not exclude people who are not interested in politics. They paint a big umbrella. They make it a big tent. So the way it's worded, it's supposed to be welcoming to both people who want to work within the political system and people who want to work outside the political system to get more freedom for themselves and others in their lifetime. Right.
The suggestion is that even though I think the Free State Project was set up by somebody who wants to work within the system for people who want to work within the system, the understanding is that we may not know everything, and therefore you need to keep yourself open to people with other ideas. And obviously you can't keep them out, so you might as well let them in. And that's the idea, right?
Yeah, I think you're right. That's kind of what I was getting at, that it's worded to be welcoming to everyone, but there is sort of a subtext of, well, working within the political system is kind of the strategy that at least the person who founded the Free State Project or thought of the idea would prefer to choose. And he now lives in New Hampshire. He's actually a professor at Dartmouth. Jason Sorens was the person who came up with the idea for the Free State Project. Anyway, so we moved to New Hampshire. When I first came here in 2006, I thought, well, what could I get active on? Well, I'll get into the political system, try to learn about New Hampshire politics. And at the time, I was in medical school, and I thought, wow, medical marijuana, what a great issue to get involved with, because, we all know that there's, it's a valuable medicine. For some people, it has therapeutic effects. For instance, cancer patients, they can't keep food down. It has real anti-nausea effects, pain-relieving effects. And people should be able to put whatever they choose into their body, especially if they claim it benefits them in some way. Who is the state to put a sick person in jail because they want to ingest part of a plant? So I got in the political system and I started testifying at the State House and getting involved with these email campaigns, writing to the legislators and stuff like that. And it was just a dismal failure at every point.
Well, I don't know if you failed. I mean, medical marijuana is now the law in New Hampshire.
Is it? I mean, I'm so disconnected from it at this point that I wasn't even really aware of that.
It's a pathetic medical marijuana law, but it is the law here. And it is the law in about half of the states in the union to some level or another. And I think that's one of the things I'd say about politics is it can be very demoralizing in the short term. You have to stick with things into the long term.
Well, it sounds like it's still demoralizing in the long term because for those people who wish that sick people would be able to, or healthy people should be able to ingest a flower bud if they want to, or if it makes them feel better, and not risk being thrown in a cage, then it's still demoralizing because that is not okay under the current political climate. So what I experienced working in politics was just lots of compromise to the point of what you were initially trying to get, you were not going to get. You were going to have to get maybe 10% of that, and maybe it would take years and years, and you'd spend a lot of money and a lot of time. I remember driving down to the New Hampshire State House to testify on these important bills. I would get these email alerts and come testify this day. So I would, take the day off from the work that I was doing and go drive down to the State House, testify, and the legislators wouldn't even show up because it was snowing or something like that.
Right. That happened to you once, right?
It happened to me a couple times. Yeah. And
most of the legislative work in New Hampshire is done during the winter because I think largely
they want to keep people out.
They want to keep people out of it, and a lot of people leave New Hampshire during the winter.
Yeah.
Residents go down to Florida for 3 months out of the year or something like that.
Yeah. So anyway, I had these frustrating experiences, and eventually I just started to think about it, and I was like, do I even really agree with the system in the first place? No, I think, you're playing a rigged game when you play politics. Right? You're playing by someone else's rules. It's not possible to make meaningful change within the system, or else they wouldn't let that happen. It wouldn't be the case.
Meaningful change isn't really what the government's set up for, right? If anything, they want slow, plodding change.
Yeah, they want the status quo to continue to reign because they benefit from the status quo. And like Emma Goldman said, if voting changed anything, it would be illegal. And
it's what one lady said.
Yeah, but it's an apt quote.
Luck doing anything other than writing some stuff, right? Like she wrote
a
book.
She actually did a lot. Did you know that she distributed pamphlets about birth control, which was illegal at the time, and she got put in jail for that? And
I'm not saying she didn't. Okay, she achieved. Right? Like she achieved putting pamphlets in people's hands.
She achieved a great deal. She put out thoughts that were revolutionary to many people. And I think she did actually have a lasting change by impacting the hearts and minds of people.
Go on with your explanation before we
okay. Yeah. Well, just to
wade in here.
Just to get this all out, just to lay this out, Mark, you have been involved in politics. So I made the decision to move away from politics. I decided it wasn't worth the frustration, the hassle, and I don't believe in their system, and I don't want to endorse it in any way by participating in it. And I believe I'm happier and better off for that. But I see you spending your time. You recently went to the Republican state convention to try to change their platform. You were going to try to get gay marriage into the Republican platform, and you had your reasons for doing this, which you laid out, and I'm sure you'll talk about those. But what happened was about 2/3 of these Republican people voted to keep the platform the way it is without gay marriage included in it. And not only that, but the choice was between putting gay marriage in the platform and voting that marriage is a fundamental institution of society, which either way, you're kind of compromising. So what I wanted to talk to you about was, why you chose to do this, if you think it was worth it, and if you're going to continue to do it. Okay. So I hope we can talk about that. All right. We are staging an intervention, or I'm at least attempting to stage an intervention with Mark about his participation in politics. And does this actually make you happy? And we're going to talk about that more. But first, let's go to the phones. This is a show where you can call and take control of the airwaves. First, we're going to talk to Rusty, listening in Houston, Texas. Hi, Rusty. You're on Free Talk Live.
Howdy, y'all. I just wanted to tell Mark, thank you for being involved in politics because it's essential. You can win the hearts and minds of people, or you can out-organize them. What you're doing, being involved in politics, hopefully is organizing other like-minded people. So when a candidate comes along, they see, yes, there's a pool to draw from, either for financial resources or for volunteer resources. And you're going to have to, you're learning the game, you're learning the ins and outs of it. And fellow Republican to another, I've been to state convention. Sometimes you go and you're the only one there who's representing liberty or has these ideas. But you being there has a huge impact. You expose other people to it who are involved. You may convert some over to your side on issues.
Now, this is Rusty. I just want to let you know this is the multiple. How many years have you been doing this, Mark? You've done this before. You've tried to change the Republican platform before.
Yeah, this is my second go around at the as a delegate to the state convention. What they do, just to be clear, the delegates here vote on the platform for the Republican Party. There's no lawmaking that goes on. This is simply like a mission statement for the Republican Party. And what I've tried to do, one of my goals was to remove marriages between one man and one woman from the state party platform and replace it with something that was somewhat innocuous, but nonetheless, that was what my hope was.
So, but there could still be Republicans who didn't agree with that, right? And who could, even if the platform got changed and it now does not say marriages between one man and one woman.
It's completely non-binding, right? Like any Republican.
So you tried to pass a non-binding thing, didn't even get that to happen. You spent a day of your life, a weekend of your life?
I wouldn't call it a weekend. No, we arrived. It started at 9. I probably rolled in at about 9:30. I had a breakfast sandwich and some coffee while I chatted with some people out in the hallway. I really didn't do much of anything while the politicians bloviated on stage about how important it was for us to vote for the most milquetoast Republicans that they could trot in front of us, including Scott Brown, and
oh boy,
who was the worst voting Republican in the Washington D.C. So, I mean, there was a lot of that going on, but I was chit-chatting with Free Staters and people I knew out in the hallway. And then when it was time to vote, I went in and I heard people full of what appeared to be bile and hate yammering on about Sharia law and,
wow,
Jesus and all these things.
Is Sharia law a threat to New Hampshire?
Well, I'll tell you what, it's in the Republican Party platform.
Wow. Rusty, any final thoughts?
Yeah, that's the same process down here in Texas, where you submit platform amendments and stuff like that. We had a gay individual retroactive therapy plank put into our platform by the religious right. And, us being there, we put pressure on our state chair, and eventually he came out against it. But we had to have those people there to just keep hounding him on it, be like, this is horrible, it's going to kill us. Because what happens is when you try to go talk to somebody, a constituent or a voter or undecided, so usually you can cite the platform and be like, well, this is what we stand for. That's kind of how it's pitched. This is what we believe in.
Yeah, I got you, Rusty. Thanks for the call tonight and sharing your experience. I mean, I don't get it. Mark, you've had 2 callers now. Thank you for your service or your sacrifice. Why? What did you actually accomplish besides wasting your time? And I mean that
seriously. They're thanking me for wasting my time.
I'm saying that because I care about you and I don't want to see you waste your time. Just like I don't want to waste my own time. What did you actually accomplish by going to this Republican delegation?
Well, let's talk about it first. So,
okay. Well, we do have another call.
Okay,
on the
then
line.
go ahead.
Sorry. Let's go first to Benjamin, listening on Skype or calling on Skype. Hi, Benjamin. You're on Free Talk Live.
Good evening.
Hey.
Okay, so it's interesting you're having this discussion because I kind of want to bring up something tangentially related that you guys were talking about last week when you had a caller call up and want to tell you how to get tell people how to get removed from the voter rolls. And
right.
Huh?
Right.
Oh yeah, just agreeing. Last week we did have somebody call in. I think it was Sleepy Salsa?
Yeah, something like that.
Who talked about how he unregistered to vote. And you can hear the archive of that at archives.freetalklive.com. So go ahead, Benjamin.
Yeah. So I wanted to agree that if you despise politics, your vote is meaningless. So don't do it. In fact, it is irrational to invest time and energy into something to which you will essentially have no effect over.
That's I agree with you completely, Benjamin.
So you've used absolute terms like no effect and things like that. And I like to use terms like unlikely and statistically insignificant. So, for instance, the things I like to say to people is,
isn't that functionally no effect?
Functionally, yes, but the fact is your vote can make a difference, especially when you're in a room with 413 people voting on something. The vote could be separated by one person. Now, the point I like to make to people is, look, Barack Obama won New Hampshire by 60,000 votes. If I voted, regardless of who I voted for in the presidential election in 2012, that fact doesn't change. Now, if I was given a gift from God to go back and change my What was that
Are
noise?
you okay, Benjamin?
That was my chair.
It sounds like a skill saw ripped right through you. If I got to go back, God gave me the ability to change my vote right now, to be able to change the election. Nothing would change. He won by 59,999 or 60,001 or whatever it was. Nothing changes because my vote doesn't matter. Does it count? Yes, it counts, but it doesn't matter because it doesn't change anything. Go ahead.
No, so I agree with that. In fact, I understand people who just don't want to be involved in electoral politics. I go and I vote, but I invest no time in voting except for going to the place, and it's right next door, so it doesn't make much of a difference. But I don't invest time in looking into the issues more so than what I've been interested in. I don't dive deeper into it. But
hold on a second, Benjamin. I mean, I actually used to take that tack, but then I just stopped doing that entirely because I believe that freedom is not on the ballot. And so anytime you go into those polling places, get the form and check that box, you're actually putting a little bit of your moral support into the system. And that's why I stopped participating, because I just didn't want to have any part of it.
I get that, but for you say it's never on the ballot, but you can walk in, at least where I live, and sometimes something like a bill to raise property taxes or sales taxes will be on the ballot. And so I just open it up. I go, well, that's stupid. And I vote no.
Yeah.
So I invest almost no time, and I at least do that. And by the way, if I get the moral support or whatever of the system, but if Massa says, hey, would you like 10 whips or 12? Go ahead and say 10, and then spend your time saying, but I'd rather not get whipped at all. And in the meantime, 10's fine.
Yeah, I don't push so hard against the idea of not voting as personally worthless I feel that it is, going to vote. But I don't push so much against people voting. I'm more concerned about people becoming politicians, because this really doesn't get done without taking some kind of money. And even the people that say, I'm running on an education platform, meaning that, look, I know I'm not going to win, but I'm just going to get the word out.
Are you talking about Ian?
Oh, whoever, Ron Paul. I mean, that's what everybody says Ron Paul did. It's well, he knew he wasn't going to win. He was just running on an education platform. How much money did Ron Paul have? Did he earn in his PACs
tons.
to do all that? Millions of dollars. Look, I've got...
And then there were allegations of mismanagement.
Sweat, South Dakota, $500,000. You could buy a city and build yourself a little paradise, with the money that it costs to become a politician. We could be buying out the country. What has the
greatest impact? Benjamin, thank you for calling tonight. This is Free Talk Live, the Sunday edition, 855-450 free. Let's talk to Matthew in Florida. Hey, Matthew, you're on Free Talk Live. What's on your mind?
Hi, I just wanted to talk about the comments that your vote really doesn't matter, and I'm kind of here to dispute that because the vote does matter. And
all right, yeah, I'd like to talk about the evidence for that. If you would hold the line, please, Matthew, and we'll talk about, does your vote actually matter? In the last segment, we were talking with Matthew in Florida, and we didn't quite have a chance to get into what he was going to say. So let's bring Matthew back on the line. Matthew, I know you had something you wanted to discuss with us about voting, and does your vote count or matter? So why don't you tell us more about that?
Well, I just wanted to say that the vote does matter.
Sorry, Matthew, your audio is breaking up. Are you on a cell phone?
I am.
Okay, that's a little bit better. Maybe continue with what you're saying.
Okay, yeah, I hear the static myself.
Yeah, now it's better.
What I was going to say is the votes do matter. Everybody's vote does matter. The problem is not enough people vote. There's only about 20% of the population that does vote. And when they do, they're party line. They're strictly party line people. I mean, you've got your strict Democratic voters and you've got your strict Republican voters. But
well, I would say that those people's votes tend to matter less because the Republican Party can count on 30% of the population voting for them. Generally,
that's
not
the numbers
San
I've heard. I've heard about a third is party line Democrat, a third is party line Republican, and a third is can go either way.
Right, and that's about it. And it's that third in the middle that makes the decision.
But that's only 20% of the population that makes up that.
Well, it
third.
depends on the election, right? Like more than half the population voted in the presidential election for Barack Obama. But when you're talking about local elections, sometimes you'll see as small as 5% or less vote for who the mayor is or who the city councilor in the ward 12 is or whatever.
Now, I want to ask you, Matthew, like, what do you find the problem with? Is it that people are uninformed, or is it that not enough people vote? Because I've actually heard the same complaint, just sort of a variation of it. I've heard people say, well, the problem is that too many people vote, but most of them are uninformed, and so only the people who actually have an opinion should turn out to vote.
Well, the problem is that Congress has made it almost impossible for anybody worth the salt to run. I mean, if you have any
true.
independent thinking, you cannot run. Well, you can run, and it doesn't cost you anything. I mean, there's 45 states that a candidate can sign up for president for free. It costs nothing. It's trying to get the word out that costs the money, and it's trying to get the mainstream media to even consider speaking to you, to be able to get your word out. So there's
Absolutely.
no way for an independent person to inform folks. I mean, you can't inform them if nobody's going to talk to you.
Yeah, so I'm hearing from you that it's really hard to get your message out if you're independent, and I agree with you there. But then how does it follow that voting makes a difference?
Well, if you have, the power's in the people. I mean, if enough people put their vote into a candidate, that candidate has a chance to make a difference.
Allegedly, but I mean, when we're looking at the Scotland situation, there's claims that the vote was screwed there. There's been more than one time here in the United States where the claims have been, especially with the electronic voting machines, that
dead people in Florida, right?
Right, but people,
Hanging
absolutely.
chest.
So, I mean, this is really difficult. Now, the only point I was making when I said that your vote doesn't matter is a mathematical point. I'm not making any point beyond that. I'm not saying that you should or shouldn't vote, but I mean, I really do think that there's a large percentage of the population, and I'm going to go out at 80%, that shouldn't vote. They're completely unqualified, and they can't make decisions well in their own lives, let alone try the attempt to make decisions in other people's lives.
So wait, you think 20% of the people are qualified to make decisions for other people?
Inside this system and understanding, like if you can't
that's
name,
why I reject the system, because I don't think anyone's qualified to make decisions for other people.
I concur
about their lives.
I have to agree with that. We live in a land of the free. You're free to make whatever decision you want to make.
Not with voting, you're not, my friend. And that's the reason I suggest that, to me, voting is a defensive measure. Because the fact is I know that other people who do want to control my life are going to vote. So my only reason for voting is to try to counteract the statists that attempt to control other people's lives. Now, I understand that mathematically I am only controlling one statist. When I go out and I vote, that I'm only attempting to counteract the vote of one of them. And usually I'm voting for the lesser of two evils, when it comes down to it.
You are correct.
Yep.
You are correct. Lesser of two evils. It's almost always voting for the lesser of two evils unless you're a strict party line voter.
Well,
I mean, there's lots of people
I think
who are
there's a lot of
strict
human
party
nature.
Matthew, thank you for calling in tonight. 855-450-3733 is our number here on Free Talk Live.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of human nature that just doesn't get taken into account, because that's usually the argument for why we need government to vote for in the first place, is because, look, people are just bad. I don't agree with that, but people are just inherently evil is the statement that kind of goes around. And Thomas Paine said, government's a necessary evil, saying that somehow it's necessary. But also, at the same time, let's say
when is evil ever necessary?
It's not, but you're right, exactly. But let's say that were true. Then you also have to consider that the very people you would actually want to have these said powers that you are voting for are the people that would never run for it.
The least likely to go for
They
it.
wouldn't. I don't think they would.
Have you heard, what is the word for that system that some people have called in and advocated before, where basically people are conscripted to become politicians? Because then the idea is that you're getting people who aren't seeking out running for office. You're getting.
I don't know the word for that, but that sounds better than what exists.
It starts with an S.
to some
it's
degree,
like
but then it's still conscription, and that's anti-freedom in itself.
Yeah, I don't buy into it. I'm just even bringing it up.
No, right. But this is the thing: is that okay? Let's say human nature requires government. Then human nature also says that government will always be sought out by those who are seeking power. It will not be sought out by the good, by the nice people.
Right. Power tends to corrupt. Power also tends to attract the corrupt. So you have this situation when you create power, centralized power, as governments tend to do. You have a situation where you're, drawing people in. Now, you know me, Stephanie, as well as most people, and you know that I'm not trying to control other people's lives by being involved in the political system, right?
Yeah, I think I could say for reasonably certain you're not trying to control other people's lives.
Right. So, when you say liberty's not on the ballot, every once in a while, liberty's on the ballot in New Hampshire, right? Like if the liberty was on the ballot at the Republican primary in my town because I was on the ballot, right? And like I have no intention of controlling people.
No, because if you're in the political system, you're still controlling people. The system is bigger than you.
I'm controlling the people that want to harm people, and that's a good thing in the political system.
But you're also controlling everyone. You can't, through the political system, you can't control some people but not others. Like you're in a system that is inherently domineering over everyone.
So if I was to remove from some law somewhere that marriage is between one man and one woman, whom am I harming?
Well, I mean, some people get John T. Kennedy to call in. He would say you're expanding government because now they have to do more paperwork to process all the gay marriages or whatever.
Yep, that's a removal of words inside the system.
Well, how about,
let's say even that your premise is true, Mark. It's still the exception, not the rule.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, and that's a problem either way.
Agreed.
Yeah.
The system's a problem. Yeah. You're not going to get any argument from me there. However, I don't mind going down a little ways down into the cave and attempting to, poke a sharp stick at the dragon in the attempt of trying to do something about it.
So, to borrow an analogy from, I think this, I don't know if he was the one who came up with it, but I've heard it from Stefan Molyneux, okay, which has, he's got some great things to say about politics and voting. The mafia is kind of a corrupt system. The mafia. It's a corrupt system, but they do a lot of good things. They do some charity and they give back to the community. They educate children. Why don't we just work within the mafia to try to improve it? If we could only make a few changes, we just have to join the mafia and try to work within the system to make it better.
Small potatoes compared to the government. And I do think we need people to go into the,
go into the mafia. What do you think? 855-450 free. This is Free Talk Live. More coming up. Let's talk a little bit more about voting.
Sure.
The caller Matthew had brought up, does your vote actually matter? And that's sort of a different question of does your vote count? I would argue that maybe your vote doesn't really count in that it's a statistical drop in the bucket. It's really not likely to.
You're not going to get an argument from me on that. On that.
That's
front.
not what I was trying to say. I was trying to say that I think even if your vote doesn't count, it does matter.
Okay.
In that it means that you're putting your energy into going and checking that box and participating in the system. And that matters. That makes a big difference to your personal integrity, to your life. You're thinking about it. It's something that's on your mind. It's something that you identify with doing. Like, people seem to get really kind of upset sometimes when you challenge the idea that one should vote in elections because they see it as a part of their identity. I'm a voter. I participate in the country, and if you don't, you're bad American, and so forth. Right?
Well, okay. So there's a whole bunch of things that have been brought up here, and I think that they're all worth looking at. I saw something where they were out trying to get Americans to point at North America on a map, and something like a quarter of them couldn't do it. And
government schools.
Consider for a second, if you thought about going to vote and you can't find North America on a map, you're unqualified. If you don't know who the vice president is, you're not qualified. I think that the vast majority of people, we've been told this is a democracy. It's a government of the people. Everybody should vote. If you don't vote, you can't complain. Those kind of things. No, I think that, look, the people who are qualified to be brain surgeons are probably the ones who are doing the brain surgery. The people who are qualified to build rocket ships are probably the ones building rocket ships. And the people who are voting, sadly, are completely, many times, unqualified to vote. And that's why I think this system is untenable. That's why I think the representative republic in which we inhabit, the Democratic Republic, in which has kind of gone from small government back in the 18th century to what it is now, essentially a global hegemony that tells every government in the world how to behave. That in and of itself is a terrible form of government because we can see what it is. We can see what happens. So all I propose in being involved in the political system is look, I moved here for the Free State Project, and you mentioned the oath previously for the Free State Project, and I'd like to hear it says I'll exert the fullest.
It's not exactly an oath. I mean,
okay, that word statement of intent.
That
is
word
the right
bugs
term.
me because
Yep.
it sounds like oath keepers.
You're right. I'm sorry. The statement of intent says that I will exert the fullest practical effort toward the creation of a society in which the maximum role of civil government is the protection of an individual's life, liberty, and property. So I go and I'm a delegate to the state convention to vote on the platform of the Republican Party for this reason: to support the other people that go and do the representative stuff, that have managed to move the ball forward in New Hampshire as far as making this place a more free state, a state where we have fewer taxes. The government's kept in check to the best they can. Obviously, they're not successful every single day. It's like having a batting average. A 300, which is 3 times out of 10, 7 times out of 10 you miss. A 300 batting average is phenomenal.
Yeah, I know you don't really advocate for national politics, at the national
I
level
don't think it's
or
worth the
whatever.
trouble.
Okay, why that
Local
yours
politics
works and that one doesn't is like I don't understand why there's a difference there. But regardless, I think there's a lot of alternatives that people could do. Like Stephanie said, there's you're taking the time to go and vote. What could you do in that time? Something that everybody's been freaking out about for years now is Obamacare. And they're like, well, we got to get to the voting booth. We got to get somebody in there that's going to put a stop to Obamacare. You have no idea if the person you vote in is going to stop Obamacare. But what you
in
can
fact,
control.
None of the politicians do seem to be wanting to stop it at all.
No, it's
the Republicans
weird.
have voted on it many times.
Sure, okay. But in any case, what you could do instead of going to the voting booth is you could go to the gym. And you could work out, or you could eat healthy, and you could
negate
one of the
the need for
easiest ways to get real freedom is to be ridiculously healthy.
Brian, people vote. People vote for 20 minutes, or let's go crazy. 1 hour every 2 years.
But how much time
going
do
to
they
work out 1 hour every 2 years?
Right,
but
if
it's
a drop in the bucket, too.
Yeah, but
Mark,
if this is
how much time do they spend following the news, though?
It depends on the person. You're taking your experience, which was you are a driven woman, Dr. Stephanie Murphy.
That's true. I was emotionally invested in it.
When you were emotionally invested in the political system, right? Like you took this crap seriously, right?
Yes.
And more seriously than I do. And so to some extent, I'm getting that. What do they call that in psychology? Where you're mirroring.
I'm
your
projecting.
You're projecting, right? Like you're projecting your thoughts onto me. Like
perhaps.
When I was sitting in that room listening to these, what I consider to be throwback knuckle draggers, talk about their thoughts on whatever the topic was, how they can basically keep young people out of the Republican Party and marginalize the Republican Party in New Hampshire to the point that it's completely irrelevant going on for the next several decades. But it's important because of Jesus or whatever that is that their thought process is. Yeah, I was frustrated and I was upset. For a half an hour or 45 minutes on my Saturday, which, I could have been digging a hole on my farm and likely just as frustrated about hitting a rock every 3 inches in the New Hampshire soil. So, I mean, I don't take my frustration too seriously.
But if voting is that serious, if that much is on the line, then there's no cost too great, and I think there are things that are far more effective that one can do.
Mark, you had something you wanted to say. We were talking earlier in the show, just in case you're just tuning in. We were talking earlier in the show about your participation in the local Republican Party in New Hampshire, trying to get the planks of their platform changed to include gay marriage, which failed. And this was your second year trying to do that. And you wanted to say what you got out of it. And I'm curious, what did you get out of it?
Well, yeah, right. So one thing is that I've been stating for 2 years is incorrect, right? I've been going and saying that we were 27 votes separated the last time in getting marriage between one man and one woman removed. And that's an incorrect statement. We were 27 votes from being able to have a vote on whether to remove marriages between one man and one woman.
So it was another step away from what you actually wanted to accomplish.
We got the vote, but the vote was essentially 1-2. 2 out of 3 people in the room said no, that's not worth doing. Many of the people that voted against, enough of the people who voted against were free staters. I saw them do it. I know they did it. Now, I know that some of them don't consider this to be an important issue and one that should not be a battleground issue. I've just used it up to this point as sort of a bellwether as to how many people in the Republican Party are liberty-oriented and how many of them they're just sort of these standard issue conservatives that populate Republican parties across the United States. And so I don't know the answer to my question, but I do know that I did find some things out.
You don't know what you got out of it? Is that what you're saying?
What I got out of it was I'm there to support the people who go and do the representative stuff. I'm trying to help them achieve what they want to achieve inside the House, and it's worth a trip across the state for me.
But what if is there anyone who you're trying to support that wants freedom on every issue every time?
Lots of people. There's lots of free staters that are that
No,
sort.
actually, I know there are lots of free staters who compromise a lot.
Yeah, there's that too. Well, compromising in order to get to get freedom on every issue every time. Some people compromise, some people don't compromise. And the compromisers, maybe they achieve what they want. I don't know the answer. I don't know which one works better, compromising or not compromising.
Well, being in the system, period, often ends up being a compromise.
Yeah.
You have to make some concessions to be able to play the game.
Many times
because you're
that's the
playing
case.
by someone else's rules.
I would like to say this, though. The Republicans voted this last year voting session to demilitarize the police in the state of New Hampshire, 75 to 25. The issue went down in flames because the Democrats voted the other direction, 75-25, to keep the police militarized because they're in the pocket of the police unions.
Wow.
The police unions is in their pocket, or whatever the terminology is. But I don't think this would have gone that way in most states. I don't think most states that Republicans would have voted 75-25 to demilitarize police departments, get rid of, mine-resistant vehicles and all these fancy toys they have. And I think that shows to some extent how the Republican Party in New Hampshire is different. So, and another thing that I get out of it, I've got to say that there's a pride-based thing, right? Like I get to say, you know what? I'm a delegate to the state convention for the Republican Party. And that's kind of
Why is that a point of pride?
Well, because people are constantly trying to talk about libertarians, how you're an American, you're a bad person, you hate the country and all those things. And, how many of those people have stood up and taken the time to go to their state capital and vote on, issues that matter to them?
No, but don't you think they would just criticize you for something else if you said, well, you haven't gone to this delegation?
No shortage of criticizing, but you can belittle their point pretty quickly.
Well, it seems like a lot to go through in order to be able to say, well, I did this. Anyway, what do you think? It's Free Talk Live.
People climb Everest and do a lot more.
The Sunday edition, 855.
Litter the mountain.
450 free, 855-450-3733.
Free Talk Live, 7 nights a week from 7 to 10 Eastern, live on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.